It all started with the sound of shattering glass. 1 second, the ballroom at the Grand Lexington Hotel was glowing under crystal chandeliers, laughter floating over the soft hum of a jazz band. And the next, everything froze. Wine sprayed like blood across a snow-white tablecloth, and a woman in a scarlet evening gown stood trembling with rage, staring down at her sleeve as if she'd been personally attacked. Her name was Victoria Hale, a regional sales director who'd clawed her way up the corporate ladder with a grin sharp enough to cut glass. She spun around and her eyes landed on him, a tall black man in a faded chambray shirt and well-worn jeans, the kind of man she thought she didn't have to notice. "You clumsy idiot," she hissed, her voice slicing through the sudden silence. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs? It's more than you make in a month." The man didn't move, didn't flinch. He stood calm, hands at his sides, a storm of whisperers already rippling through the room. Victoria's lip curled. "What are you gawking at? People like you shouldn't even be allowed in here." The words hit like a slap before her hand even moved. But she didn't stop there. She raised her diamond-studded fingers high and slapped him so hard the sound cracked through the ballroom louder than the breaking glass. Gasps rippled. Champagne flutes froze midair. And the man, this stranger in worn denim, just turned his head slowly back toward her, a red mark blooming on his cheek. His eyes steady calm, like he'd seen this all before. For a heartbeat, nobody breathed. Victoria felt powerful. She'd restored order, put the help back in his place. "Someone get this man out of here," she barked, snapping her fingers at no one in particular. "And bring me club soda now." But no one moved. Not a server, not her two junior executives who usually trailed her every step. All eyes drifted toward him, and in that heavy silence, something shifted. The servers hesitated, exchanging glances. He wasn't wearing their crisp black and white uniforms. He wasn't hunched or apologetic. He stood there with the quiet composure of someone who owned the floor. Then an older man stepped forward from the edge of the crowd, silver hair gleaming under the lights. Leonard Briggs, the chairman of the board, his reputation legendary, his presence commanding. He didn't even glance at Victoria. He walked straight to the man in denim. "Mr. Carter Leonard," said, his voice low but clear. "Are you all right?" The name landed like a thunderclap. Mr. Carter, the respectful title. Not sir, not man, not waiter. Suddenly people were connecting dots. This wasn't a staff member. This wasn't some random guest. And Victoria, for the first time that night, felt a cold prickle crawl up her spine. "I'm fine, Leonard," the man replied calmly, using the chairman's first name like they were old friends. "Thank you." Whispers spread like wildfire. Who was he? A VIP, a board member? Victoria's certainty cracked, but her pride held strong. She straightened her spine, smoothed her dress, convinced herself she'd done nothing wrong. She'd made a snap judgment, sure, but hadn't she protected the image of the company? She had no idea she'd just signed her own pink slip. Ethan Carter stood in that glittering ballroom, the sting on his cheek fading, and thought of his father's garage in a small Georgia town. The smell of motor oil, hot metal, and coffee brewed so strong it could wake the dead. He remembered his father's words spoken while wiping grease from his hands. "Son, the world's gonna try to tell you your worth by what you're wearing, the car you drive, or the color of your skin. Don't you ever believe them. Your worth isn't on you, it's in you." Those words had carried Ethan through a scholarship interview in a borrowed suit, through late nights coding in a freezing apartment, through 2 successful startups built from nothing. He'd learned to read people, to measure them not by their resume, but by their character. And now he'd been hired to lead Titan Dynamics, a billion-dollar corporation, drowning in arrogance and toxic culture. He'd come tonight dressed as himself, wanting to see the truth of the company without the veil of power. He hadn't expected to get slapped. But maybe this was better than any memo, any secret audit. Tonight had given him a case study in the form of a woman named Victoria Hale. The party carried on, at least on the surface. The band struck up another tune, servers cleaned the mess, and glasses refilled. But tension lingered like smoke. Victoria perched near the front, convinced this was her night to rise even higher. Rumor had it the board was naming the next CEO tonight, and she was certain it was her. She smiled confidently, imagining the applause when they said her name. The spotlight dimmed the room to a hush. Leonard Briggs stepped up to the podium, his gravelly voice filling the space. "Tonight we don't just turn a page. we begin a new chapter, one built on innovation, integrity, and respect. The words seemed to echo, and Victoria shifted uneasily. After months of searching, Leonard continued, and the board's choice was unanimous. Our new leader is a man who built companies by empowering people, a man whose track record is unmatched. Victoria's heart pounded. She straightened her dress, ready to step into the light. Ladies and gentlemen, Leonard said, his voice steady, please welcome the new Chief Executive Officer of Titan Dynamics, Mr. Ethan Carter. The name hit the room like a lightning strike. Silence fell. People looked at one another, brows furrowed, until recognition spread a slow, dawning wave of horror. Heads turned as one toward the tall man in the chambray shirt standing at the edge of the ballroom, the faint red handprint still visible on his cheek. Victoria's stomach dropped. Her mind screamed, "No, no, no," as her body swayed. She grabbed a table to steady herself. It wasn't possible. She'd slapped the CEO. Ethan began walking toward the stage, slow and deliberate. The crowd parted instinctively like water before a ship's bow. His worn clothes no longer looked cheap, they looked like a declaration. By the time he reached the microphone, the room was suffocatingly silent. He didn't glance at notes. He didn't need them. His gaze swept the crowd, finally landing on Victoria. An interesting thing happened on my way to this stage, he said softly, his voice carrying easily. I was mistaken for staff, which doesn't bother me. There's honor in every job, no shame in serving others. My father spent his life working with his hands, and he was the most honorable man I've ever known. But what followed was different. His fingers grazed his cheek. I was told I shouldn't be here, called incompetent, and then I was struck by one of our own leaders. His eyes never left hers. Ms. Victoria Hale, would you please step forward? A murmur ran through the crowd. Victoria froze. The two colleagues flanking her stepped away like she was contagious. She forced her legs to move every step heavier than the last until she stood beneath Ethan's gaze like a defendant before a judge. At Titan, Ethan said, his voice calm but edged with steel, we will build a culture where respect isn't optional, where no one is above another and no one is beneath. We will not tolerate prejudice. We will not tolerate arrogance. And we will absolutely not tolerate violence. Leonard stepped up beside him. Hale, he announced, his tone cold as ice, by direction of the CEO. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. Gasps echoed. Security guards moved in silently, guiding Victoria out as tears streaked down her once perfect makeup. She didn't argue. She didn't fight. She simply disappeared through the heavy doors, her red dress trailing like a wound. When the doors shut, Ethan turned back to the crowd. What you saw tonight isn't just about one person, he said, his voice strong now. It's about a culture that lets someone believe this behavior was acceptable. Starting tomorrow, we're launching a company-wide initiative to rebuild this place from the ground up. Respect will be our foundation. The room erupted in applause, not polite clapping, but a roaring wave of relief and hope. People stood cheering, some even wiping their eyes. In a single night, this stranger in denim had become their leader, not by title, but by action. Later, after the ballroom emptied and the last glass was cleared away, Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows staring at the city lights stretching to the horizon. He touched his cheek, feeling the faint ghost of that slap. It wasn't humiliation anymore. It was a reminder of purpose. His father's voice echoed in his head, your worth is in you, power. Ethan thought wasn't about titles or fear. Real power was turning an ugly moment into a catalyst for change. Firing Victoria was just a symbol. The real work began now, dismantling arrogance, building trust brick by brick. And he was ready. Somewhere out there, Victoria was probably telling herself she'd been humiliated by a cruel twist of fate. Maybe some viewers would even sympathize with her. Maybe they'd say he was too harsh. But others, they'd see what really happened. So let me ask you, was he right to fire her on the spot? Have you ever seen someone's true character revealed under pressure like that? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what side of this you're on. Because stories like this, they're not just stories, they're reflections of who we are.